You're legally a stranger. If you want to enter, pay an entrance fee of $30,000. I headed to Emma's wedding wearing jewelry, a beautiful dress, and high-heeled shoes, which I do not usually wear. Dressing up. I was all dressed up and felt so good, but Emma didn't let me enter the venue. Suddenly being asked to pay an entrance fee, I was puzzled. Seeing me like that, Tony, standing next to me, muttered, "Let's go back." At that moment, I felt the strength leaving my body. Considering how she treated me before, there was no need to persuade her and attend the wedding. Such thoughts crossed my mind. Yes, let's. Accepting Tony's words, I left the venue. As I was leaving, I caught sight of Emma's triumphant expression. When will her personality improve? No, maybe it will never get better. Am I imposing my views on Emma's life by trying to intervene? Thoughts swirled in my mind. 3 minutes after leaving the venue, suddenly, my phone rang. It was Emma. Wondering what she wanted, I answered the phone. At that time, I had no idea that this incident would turn into such a big deal. My name is Kelly Jones. 43 years old. After graduating from university, I moved away from my hometown and took a job as an office worker at a construction company. Since my university days, I had felt a sense of fear about becoming a working adult. Just before joining the company, I had various worries, such as whether I could handle the job and build good relationships. However, the workplace environment was good, and everyone around me was kind. So my fears quickly faded. Supported by supervisors, seniors, and peers, I was able to take my first step as a working adult. Helped by those around me, I managed my daily work. Of course, there were times when I was scolded or felt down. But I think I was able to continue working because the work environment was good. Several years into my job, I became a manager. And my life became busier and more enjoyable than before. However, I had a new worry. That I couldn't get married. No, forget getting married, I didn't even have a boyfriend. All the new employees who joined the company recently as fresh graduates got married and left the company, which heightened my anxiety towards the future uncertainty. There were times when I couldn't genuinely say congratulations on their marriages. Will I remain single forever, with everyone else getting married and leaving me behind? I was often depressed alone, thinking about the worst outcomes. Then one day, I was invited to a mixer by a senior. Perhaps I was just being used to round out the numbers or to make others look good. I knew attending that mixer would make me feel insecure. However, for some reason, I still wanted to show up. On the day of the mixer, when I arrived at the designated location, several attendees were already there, lost in their own worlds. I casually took a seat at the empty seat and waited alone for the mixer to start. Something might change once it started. I had a faint hope, but it was quickly dashed. Even after the mixer started, the other participants were having fun in their own worlds. I was hardly in their sight. Eventually, I was filled with thoughts of how to make excuses to leave and how to escape from the situation. However, an hour into the mixer, a man approached me. This man would later become my husband, Tony. "May I sit next to you?" Yes. Although I couldn't respond well to his sudden approach, Tony seemed unbothered. We had already introduced ourselves, so we knew each other's names. "You're Kelly, right? I was worried because you were alone." "Oh, no, you don't need to worry about that." Tony smiled lightly and took a sip from his glass. Come to think of it, he seemed to be drinking alone too. As I thought about it vaguely, Tony spoke up again. "I was drinking alone, so I thought it would be nice to talk together." "Yes. I believe so. It might be rude to say, but we were both leftovers. Maybe that's why, but somehow our wavelengths matched, and talking to him felt comfortable. Before I knew it, the mixer, which initially felt like an eternity, was approaching its end. Is it almost over? I was reluctant to leave. As I was thinking about this, he made a suggestion. Could we exchange contact information? If you are okay with it, I'd like to meet again. Oh, of course. I never thought he would ask for my contact information, and I blurted out in a silly voice. But the chance to meet him again. I immediately took out my phone and we exchanged contact information. After that, Tony and I met frequently. And over a period of months, we progressed from friends to lovers. Sure, I had wanted a boyfriend someday. But I hadn't thought that a man I met at a mixer would become my boyfriend. With each date, I grew more and more fond of Tony. Above all, I felt happy just being with Tony, and I often hoped he felt the same way about me. I wish this time could continue forever. If possible, I hope to eventually marry Tony. About 6 months into this routine, while I was talking to Tony as usual, he suddenly started to look gloomy. What's wrong? Actually, I have something I want to discuss. Tony took a deep breath and started speaking. I was shocked by what he revealed. Tony had been divorced once before. Moreover, he apparently had a child. The child's name is Emma. However, he said that this child is neither his nor his ex-wife's biological child. They had adopted Emma together. But a certain fight had led to a major breakdown in their marriage. As a result, they divorced. His ex-wife lost interest in Emma, so Tony took her in and has been raising her alone ever since. He has not yet told her about this. Tony said he plans to tell Emma when she becomes an adult. I should have told you sooner. It must be a shock to hear this all of a sudden. Indeed, I was surprised. But did I want to break up with Tony? No. In fact, I wanted to raise Emma together with him. That's what I thought. I'm serious about our future together. That's why I wanted to tell you. If you're disappointed in me now, I understand. Disappointed? I'm happy you told me, and I love you just the way you are. I want to spend my future with you too. When I expressed my feelings, Tony's face brightened up. Really? Of course. I wouldn't lie about something like this, right? That's a relief. Thank you. Then, Tony talked more about Emma. His expression was much softer than before he told me the truth. Actually, would you meet Emma? Since we might end up living together soon. He looked down, mumbling shyly. Yes. I'd love to. Naturally, there was no reason to decline his invitation. I smiled and nodded my head. A week later, I visited Tony's home and met Emma. Hello. Hi. We briefly introduced ourselves and continued the conversation under Tony's guidance. Emma barely looked at me. Although she wasn't playing with her phone, she kept looking at the floor or the walls, never making eye contact with me. What's wrong? You seem off. Do I? It's nothing. Emma continued to avoid looking at me. Emma, you're in middle school now, right? Well, yeah. Despite my attempts to engage her, she responded somewhat indifferently. It's a difficult age, and she probably didn't want to talk to her father's girlfriend. Sensing this, I didn't force communication. 30 minutes later, when Tony went to the bathroom, Emma, who seemed uninterested in me, suddenly started talking. Hey, are you going to marry my dad? Well, we've talked about wanting to, yes. There was no need to lie. I honestly shared that I was considering marriage. Then, Emma looked at me critically and snorted with laughter. You and my dad, huh? I think it's fine, but my dad has poor taste in women. Couldn't he find someone better? What? I couldn't believe her words and had to ask again. Why are you surprised? I'm just saying what I think. It would have been nice to brag about having a prettier girlfriend. I never expected to be told something like this upon first meeting, and I struggled to respond. Regardless of how Emma berated me, my desire to marry Tony remained unchanged. However, I wondered if I could live well with her. Could I really be a good mother? Anxiety about our future life together only grew. A year after meeting Emma, Tony and I got married. Although I had seen Emma during that time, it seemed she still didn't like me. The way she looked at me and her attitude seemed annoyed. All of this confused me. Indeed, Tony seemed troubled too. No matter how much he scolded her, she wouldn't listen. There were also times when he apologized for Emma's behavior. I'm really sorry. I never imagined Emma would treat you so rudely. Don't worry about it. Certainly, the words from Emma were harsh. But I never thought of calling off the marriage because of it. I vaguely hoped that Emma would eventually settle down. However, my wish did not come true. It had been 2 years since I married Tony. Emma became more tyrannical than I could have ever imagined. Hey. Give me some money. Didn't I just give you some? What are you spending it on? Socializing. Seriously, isn't my allowance too little? My friends get more. I was sure I was giving Emma enough allowance. Yet, she still said it wasn't enough. You can't just keep asking for luxuries. No means no. Ugh. You're so useless. Since middle school, Emma had often hung out with friends. The frequency of hangouts increased when she became a high school student. And so, she began to demand more allowance. This is unbelievable. Why do you act like my mother when you're not even related by blood? What do you mean by acting like your mother? Sure, we're not related by blood, but I am your mother now. Maybe that was a bit harsh to say. But without being this stern, Emma wouldn't listen. It really pisses me off. Getting all high and mighty. Who says you're my mother? No matter how much I admonished her, Emma kept saying hurtful things to me. It's okay if she doesn't recognize me as her mother, but that's a different issue. Regardless of what you say, I am your mother. You always say the same thing. This is pointless. It was always like this. Emma would disappear before we could resolve anything. And the next day, we would have the same kind of argument again. I might understand if she does not listen to me and only me. But Emma wouldn't listen to Tony either. Hey. Emma. Enough is enough. Don't trouble your mom. What mom? She's a stranger. A stranger. I don't need to listen to someone like her. You know. Her grades, which had drastically fallen since middle school. Her poor behavior. Everything was beyond my control. Initially, I thought it was just her age, but now that she's a high school student, I worry about her future. But now that her attitudes and character are formed, there was nothing I could do about Emma. Hey, give me my allowance. Now. Didn't I just give you some? When did you use it? Does that even matter? I've told you before. I need it to hang out with friends. Wait, are you okay with me being left out? When refused allowance, Emma always used her social life as leverage. That's not what I said. You really don't get it, do you? I wonder where I went wrong. I hate my past self for not being able to handle Emma better. Even though she didn't like me from the beginning, maybe there was something more I could have done. Every time Emma spoke cruelly to me, I didn't feel anger but a sense of helplessness instead. 3 years later. After graduating high school, Emma neither pursued further education nor employment but led a slothful life at home. She often stayed at home all day but would whimsically go out to hang out. No matter how much I admonished her, my words never seemed to reach her ears. "You're up at this hour again. Get it together." "What do you mean by that?" "You need to be more specific or I won't understand." "I mean..." "Ah. So annoying." "Don't bother explaining, it's so irritating." Emma interrupted me and began preparing to go somewhere. "Wait, where are you going today? Does it matter? Besides, I'm an adult now. It's none of your business where I go or what I do." "But..." "Ah. So annoying." "Oh, right. Give me some allowance." When she was a student, I would give her an allowance. Besides the fixed amount each month, there were times when I gave in to her demands. I still regret having spoiled her too much. However, Emma had already graduated from high school. I wished she would get a job or something and take care of her own finances. If you call yourself an adult, at least earn your own spending money? What's wrong with you? You're really annoying. Ultimately, my wish for Emma to understand did not come true. Instead, she shocked me with a startling revelation. "Look, I don't need to work anymore." "What? What do you mean?" "Surely not." No. I can't stay in this house forever. I'm getting married. My husband says it's okay for me to be a housewife, so I don't need to work." I was speechless with shock. "What, marriage? I haven't heard about this. I'm telling you now for the first time." Unaware of my feelings, Emma just laughed carelessly. "If she's getting married, shouldn't there be some preparation or formalities? If it's decided, you should have told me sooner." "What's he like? What does he do?" "Ah. Don't ask so much. I can bring him over once." "Really? Please do." I never expected Emma to suggest bringing her fiancé over herself. I was surprised but happily accepted her proposal. That night, I told Tony about my conversation with Emma during the day. At first, he was shocked, but then he looked somewhat relieved and muttered, "So, she's getting married too. Indeed, even though we're not related by blood, she's still the daughter we've cherished. It must be quite emotional for him." After thinking for a while, Tony looked down at the newspaper. His gaze seemed a bit lonely. Later, Emma kept her promise and brought her fiancé over. "Nice to meet you. I'm Brian Anderson." Brian greeted nervously. His clear voice and confident demeanor gave me a good impression of him as a bright young man. Brian works in sales at a major trading company. He said he met Emma when they were high school students. Brian fell in love with Emma at first sight, confessed, and now here they are. Such a heartwarming story made me smile. Emma seemed to have a softer expression than usual too. An hour later, Emma left the house with Brian. She really met a wonderful person. The harsh treatment I received from Emma hasn't changed, and I have no intention of forgiving her. But seeing her smile, I strangely felt relieved and found myself smiling too. A year later, the day of Emma and Brian's wedding arrived. How happy I was to see Emma in her bridal gown. I got ready with excitement, wearing jewelry and a dress I don't usually wear. I put on high-heeled shoes and headed to the venue. Tony seemed to have shaky hands while driving. Is it excitement or nervousness? No, it must be both. He was really looking forward to this wedding. We arrived at the venue and entered. Wow. There were luxurious chandeliers and many elegant items, and I couldn't help but be dazzled. I've been to friends' and acquaintances' weddings at such places several times. But I'm always moved no matter how many times I go. Ah. You came. While we were looking around the venue, Emma approached us. It seemed she had been waiting for us. "How are things going?" "Forget that." Instead of answering my question, Emma pointed at me and said, "You're legally a stranger. If you want to enter, pay an entrance fee of $30,000. I was speechless. I did not expect her to treat me like a fool here as well. As I struggled to respond, Tony, standing next to me, spoke up. "Let's go back." At that moment, I felt the strength leaving my body. Indeed, I had been looking forward to the wedding. But enough was enough. Do I really need to attend the wedding of someone who pains me this much? Emma's words quickly cooled my enthusiasm for the wedding. "Yes, let's." I accepted Tony's suggestion, and we left the venue. As we were leaving, I caught a glimpse of Emma's triumphant expression. We got into the car and left. A heavy silence hung between me and Tony. Neither of us had the energy to talk or find a topic to discuss. Sigh. Overcome by a sense of futility, I let out a sigh. Did happiness slip away again? As I pondered this, about 3 minutes after leaving the venue, my phone rang. Looking at the screen, I saw Emma's name. After kicking us out, what could she want? As I hesitated to answer, the call ended abruptly. But then, she called again. The phone rang several times and disconnected on its own. It was all too strange. Then, when the phone rang again, I cautiously answered. At that moment. "Hey. Come back quickly." Emma's voice pierced through to my ear. "What? What is it all of a sudden? Just come." "But we're already on our way home, and we can't come back right away. Besides, after you told us to leave, now you want us back?" Brian scolded me. He asked why I would chase away my own parents. "Please, come back quickly." Emma was being incredibly selfish. Perhaps she really thinks I would come back if she asks. "What? You want us back because you got scolded?" Just stop. Come back quickly. If you don't, my wedding will be ruined." Emma pleaded in a tearful voice. However, her voice did not move my heart. First of all, it was your weird demand. For an entrance fee of $30,000 that started all this, wasn't it? Then, at least ask Dad to come back. It seemed that Tony, who was driving, could hear Emma's loud voice. "There's no way we're coming back. What kind of nonsense is this? Both Mom and I are not coming back, so deal with it yourself." "Kelly, you can hang up now." I did as Tony said and hung up the phone. Emma was still making a fuss as I hung up, but I ignored it. After hanging up, I quickly put my phone away in my bag. When I got home and checked my phone, as expected, there were several missed calls. Of course, all from Emma. The number of calls easily exceeded 20, and I couldn't help but laugh at her desperation. Since the calls stopped a few minutes ago, it seemed she had finally given up. Ultimately, Emma didn't contact me again that day. Nor the next day, nor the day after. She must have been scolded harshly by Brian and didn't feel like contacting us. Neither of us felt like reaching out, so we left things as they were. However, a week later, Emma suddenly showed up at our house. Considering how angry she seemed, I didn't know what she might do if I let her in. So, I decided to deal with her at the front door. "What's up? Why come all of a sudden? Why didn't you come to the wedding? I asked you so much. Why?" "Well, I called so many times, and you didn't answer." Brian got really mad, and his relatives looked at me coldly. "What are you going to do about it?" It was just unbelievable how selfish she was. I sighed and replied to Emma. "It's not our fault, right? We left because you started talking about an entrance fee. Plus, even when you asked us to come back, we couldn't feel like returning because of your past behavior. My past behavior? Emma tilted her head, seemingly clueless. Could it be that she isn't aware of what she has done up until now? If so, it's more worrying than infuriating. You ignored what we said, went out to hang out, begged us for money. When we tried to warn you, you threw tantrums and locked yourself in your room. At first, we endured it because we thought it was just your age, but we have our limits too. Huh? That stuff? Can you stop saying I threw tantrums? It makes me sound like a child. If you don't want me to use that word, it must mean you admit to behaving in a way that deserves it, right? If you hadn't, you'd deny it. I seized the opportunity to say what I needed to say. If I missed this chance, I wouldn't know when we could have a proper discussion next. However, Emma dodged my words. I'm sick of your know-it-all attitude. After all, you're just a stranger. Don't try to tell me what to do. Then, as a stranger, you shouldn't be begging me for money, right? Understand? Emma looked at me with a bitter face. She was obviously frustrated that she couldn't retort. I don't care about you anymore. Go away. Okay. Goodbye. With that, Emma stormed off. It was the first time I expressed myself so candidly without mincing words. And it felt strangely liberating. This should keep her from barging into our house for a while. At least, I thought so. Indeed, she stopped coming over. But later, I heard something unexpected. About a month after Emma's visit, I went to the city hall for some errands and happened to see Brian. Hello, Brian. Feeling obligated to apologize for the wedding incident, I approached Brian. I'm sorry about last time. It seems we dragged you into our family trouble. Oh, no, don't worry about it. It was really Emma's fault. But his reaction was clearly off. He seemed bewildered and shocked by my approach. What's wrong? Oh, were you busy? Sorry. I'll leave you be then. Oh, no, that's not it. Have you been discharged from the hospital? Discharged? Hospital? Apparently, Brian had been told that I was hospitalized. I'm sorry. I wanted to apologize about the wedding and everything. But I was told you were hospitalized and couldn't be contacted. They said visits were restricted to only your husband and Emma. Hospital. Why would they say I was hospitalized? Yes. So I wasn't expecting to meet you here. Sorry, I didn't mean to be rude. No, you're not at fault at all. I shared my thoughts with Brian while still confused. Brian's expression softened slightly at my words. Still, why would she lie about you being hospitalized? Indeed, why would she concoct such a lie? What was she trying to achieve? Remembering the tumultuous past, I desperately tried to imagine what Emma could have been thinking. What she might have been planning. Maybe. A thought suddenly crossed my mind. I wasn't sure if it was correct, but I decided to share it with Brian as one possibility. Maybe she didn't want to get scolded by you, Brian? Didn't want to get scolded? I heard from her about the wedding incident. You were quite angry with Emma, weren't you? Maybe she made up the story about me being hospitalized to gain sympathy. She probably thought that would take your anger away. What do you think? I see. When I shared my sudden thought, Brian seemed to understand it peculiarly well. Indeed, after the wedding, my anger didn't subside. And I hardly spoke to her. Hearing that you were hospitalized made me feel it was not the right time to be mad. I fell right into Emma's trap, didn't I? It's embarrassing. Brian furrowed his brow and held his head in his hands. He seemed sad to have been deceived by Emma. I wondered what I could say to comfort him. As I stared at Brian, thinking of what to say, he suddenly spoke up. But, if that's the case, what about? What's wrong? Brian looked even more bewildered than when we first met. Curious, I asked him for more details. Lately, Emma has been saying she's going to visit you in the hospital. And leaves the house often. She says she's staying at your house because her dad feels lonely. At my house? But she hasn't come. In that moment, the worst scenario flashed through my mind. Should I tell Brian, or should I keep silent? No, I definitely had to tell him. Surely, he must have realized it himself. Could it be, she's not cheating, is she? Do you think so too? I can't imagine her frequently staying over at a friend's house. Brian's face turned pale instantly. The lies he had been told, and the possibility of her cheating. In just a few minutes, how had his feelings for Emma changed? I couldn't know the details, but surely they weren't good. Maybe you should hire a PI to conduct a surveillance. It's just a suggestion, though. That was all the advice I could give. Having evidence would be beneficial. Whether to divorce or not was up to Brian. I shouldn't rush him, he could decide in his own time. Later, Brian seemed to make up his mind and said, "Thank you. I'll consider hiring a PI." His eyes looked determined yet somewhat sad. 2 weeks later, he called me. It turned out that the PI confirmed Emma was cheating. He was shown plenty of heartbreaking evidence. And I could tell from his voice alone that he was deeply exhausted. But to think she was cheating. I suspected it, but it was still painful to have it confirmed. "I'm really sorry that my daughter." "No, it's okay." Struggling to find the right words to comfort him. I remained silent as Brian took a deep breath and said, "I'm going to divorce her." "Is that okay?" "Of course." I had no right to stop Brian's decision. Especially since my daughter had caused him so much trouble. Later, Brian mentioned he wanted to have a discussion involving all of us. It could have been through lawyers, but he preferred to talk directly first. I couldn't refuse. I too wanted to hear what Emma had to say. We then agreed to meet a week later and hung up. What would happen next? Would Emma admit to her actions? Feeling overwhelmed with anxiety, I sank into the sofa nearby to escape my thoughts. A week later, Tony, Brian, Emma, and I sat at our house. "What's this about?" "I have plans, you know." Emma sat with her legs thrown out, continuing her nonchalant demeanor. "And you, what's this?" "If you had something to say, couldn't you have just not dragged me here? Couldn't you have just talked between us? Didn't want to talk alone?" "That's not it. I wanted your mother and father to be involved too." I said I didn't want them, but you do what you want to, huh?" Nobody wanted to be called selfish by Emma. I'm sure I'm not the only one who thought that. But Brian nodded without changing his expression. "So? What?" "Hurry up and finish. I'm doing you a favor by being here." Emma clapped her hands as if to hurry us along. "Emma, let's get a divorce." The room went silent. Even Emma seemed unable to comprehend what she had just been told. "Huh? Divorce? Why?" "I don't think I can continue this relationship with you. You're selfish, and you spend too much." "What do you mean?" "I haven't been selfish at all. That's not all." Saying that, Brian pulled out a stack of documents from his desk. "You've been cheating, haven't you?" "I hired a PI to investigate." "Huh? A PI? That's low." Emma did not deny the cheating but expressed disgust at the fact he hired a PI. which made it seem like she had something to feel guilty about. Also, haven't you noticed? Why is your supposed to be hospitalized mother here? Didn't you find that strange?
Ah.
It seemed she had spun so many lies she couldn't keep track. Emma looked at me and her face turned pale. Mom, why are you here? How about you stop pretending? And calling me Mom now of all times. Listen. I know all about it. I know you lied to Brian saying I was hospitalized. I know about you going to your lover under the pretense of visiting me. I know you said you were staying at your parents' because your dad was lonely. I know everything, okay? That's impossible. Emma was in despair. Did she really think her lies would never be uncovered? And it was me who suggested to Brian he should hire a PI. Huh? Why would you suggest that? Aren't I your daughter? Couldn't you have been on my side just a little? I'm your daughter, you say. But legally, we're strangers, aren't we? So I'm not your mother or anything, am I? Saying such things now. That's why you're called selfish. Emma always tried to manipulate situations to her advantage. I could no longer let myself be manipulated by her.
Ah.
This is too much. Everyone's awful. Why are you all doing this to me? Have you ever considered my feelings? I could say the same to you. All of this happened because you've lived as you pleased up to now. I've always loved you and even tolerated your whims. But being lied to and cheated on. After that, I can't trust anything anymore and don't want to live with you. All I want now is a divorce and compensation. Could you at least grant me that last request? Divorce and compensation. A perfectly reasonable demand, but Emma seemed unable to comprehend it. Divorce is one thing, but I have to pay compensation. Of course, you do. After everything you've done. No. Absolutely not. I'll agree to the divorce, but not a penny for him. As usual, Emma began to throw a tantrum. I've done nothing wrong. I did cheat. But it all started because of Brian. Me. Brian was taken aback by the sudden shift of blame. Yet, her reasons were too self-serving. Because you weren't attractive enough. It was boring being with you. I really wanted to break up. But then you got a good job. And I thought you might be worth something. You know. I almost leaped forward at her words. But I reminded myself that this was between Emma and Brian and managed to restrain myself. And you, asking for a divorce and compensation after you were the one who proposed? Do you think a housewife like me has money? It was you who said it was okay for me to not work. You should take responsibility and support me for life. You've only seen me as a source of money, haven't you? Obviously. I couldn't see you as a man anymore, so I kept seeing my boyfriend. I was appalled by her cruel words. No matter how much we tried to intervene, she wouldn't stop, and I was overwhelmed by despair. But then. But. Emma suddenly shouted as if she had an idea. I'll agree to the divorce. Really? I'll even pay the compensation. What a turn of events. I looked up in surprise, and Emma was smiling eerily at Tony. Hey, Dad. About the compensation. Will you pay for it? What? You're a stranger, but Dad isn't. He'll definitely be on my side because he's supposed to. Right, Dad? It's for your cute daughter, after all. Emma's voice was cloyingly sweet as she pressed Tony. The scene was painfully distasteful. All eyes turned to Tony, who had not spoken since Emma and Brian arrived. What decision would he make? As we watched, he spoke a truth he had never told Emma before. I can't do that. What? Why not? Because I'm not your real father. You're adopted. By your logic, since we're not blood related, we're strangers. The air froze. Not just Emma, but Brian's face stiffened too. Besides, listening to you now, how can you live so selfishly and claim you're not at fault? I tried to raise you to be a kind person. Even though we're not blood related, I cared deeply. No, that's a lie. You're saying that because you don't want to pay compensation, right? I know it. Why would I lie at this point? I'm not you. Anyway, neither your mother nor I will help you anymore. And this is a good opportunity. We're going to annul the adoption. You better learn to live on your own from now on. At that moment, I could see tears streaming down Emma's face. Please, don't abandon me. It's impossible to suddenly live on my own like this. Mom. Brian. Say something, won't you? I'm sorry, but I agree with Dad. It's quite convenient for you to only turn to us when you're in trouble. You've caused enough trouble for everyone around you, now you need to manage on your own. Emma then turned to Brian, desperate for support. Brian. You're on my side, right? No. I can't live with you anymore. I understand it's sad not to know your real parents. But if I keep living with you, I feel like I'll be ruined. No. Please, someone. Don't leave me. I was wrong. I'll change, I promise. Usually, her tantrums fixed everything, but not today. Emma continued to cry and scream, admitting her faults repeatedly. However, her words sounded like lies to everyone. Once things calmed down, she would likely return to her usual selfish ways. We all remained silent, watching her, until Emma agreed to the divorce and to pay the compensation. True to her nature, she didn't offer a single apology until the very end. Later, through a lawyer, Brian filed for divorce and sought compensation. Tony and I proceeded with the annulment of the adoption. Emma was silent, no longer throwing her usual tantrums. How would she manage her life after losing everything? That is something only she could figure out. Even after we dissolved the adoption. She came to our house several times claiming she had no money. But we turned her away, reminding her that she was a stranger now. Emma looked sad, but I no longer needed to care. Surprisingly, I found that my feelings for her had completely vanished. Tony seemed to feel the same. Being the kind person that he is, I thought he might still care for Emma after the annulment. But he never mentioned her name again. That alone was a clear sign of how angry he was. Now, a year later, Tony and I are enjoying a peaceful life. Perhaps our happiness stems from no longer being involved with Emma. We've continued to keep her away, and she no longer comes to our house. Since we don't know her current whereabouts or what she is doing. I am not worried at all, a sure sign that my feelings have cooled completely. Lately, our joy has been in planning trips together. Having been controlled by Emma for so long. Being able to spend time with just the two of us is incredibly satisfying. We were just talking about planning our next trip. Maybe going abroad would be nice. But wherever we go, as long as I'm with Tony, I know I'll enjoy it. I thought this as I flipped through a travel magazine nearby.